First off, hats off to Doug Burgum. He tore his ACL yesterday. Again, today is Wednesday, I'm talking about. It's Wednesday night, right after the debate. Hats off to him because Tuesday he tore his ACL playing a pickup game of basketball, and he was up there the whole time. He didn't look like he was in pain at all. I'm sure he was on some crazy pain meds or something, but he was at the debate. Didn't know anything about him. I thought he did a pretty good job in the debate. Other than that, though, I am not going to talk about Asa Hutchinson or Doug Burgum. And it's really no disrespect. Like, if you're a big fan of them, I apologize that I'm not talking about them. They barely made it to the debate. They're probably not going to make it to the second debate. They weren't given quite as much time as the other people. I thought they were given a generous amount of time. Fox News did a really good job, I thought, of moderating this. They took a really hard position against a lot of interruptions, which happened mostly through Vivek Ramaswamy and Mike Pence, which we'll get to in a second. But hopefully I'm not offending anyone by saying I'm not going to talk about Asa Hutchinson or Doug Burgum. They didn't do anything particularly noteworthy. They didn't do anything bad. It's just I don't think that they have a big shot, so we're not going to talk about them. That's how it is. A few observations. I want to give a few observations generally of the debate at the beginning of today's episode, and then a few at the end. The first one that really I thought was a great thing was Joe Biden was actually not talked about a lot. And one could say, hey, but Joe Biden is really bad. This next election needs to be a referendum on this. This is something that the Republican nominee can get to in the general debates when they're debating Joe Biden. It's that I can't even imagine that day because it's going to be so bad for Joe Biden. It's going to be awesome. But basically, they didn't need to talk about Joe Biden because it's not about Joe Biden. It's about the Republican nominee. And although people did bring it up, usually regarding the economy, because the economy is booty cheeks, as I've talked about in the past, for the most part, people talked about the future. And as we'll talk about a little bit towards the end, there was a big emphasis on moving forward rather than looking back. That was particularly true when it came to Donald Trump. Now, what we're going to do today is I'm going to basically walk us through every single person that was up on the debate stage, some of their highlights, as well as how they interacted with some other people. I'm just going to talk about my impressions and what happened. First, we're going to talk about Tim Scott. Tim Scott was pretty good up on the debate stage. He really hit hard on education. He talked a lot about the economy. He's been a very good senator, and so I appreciated him sharing his story. He did good, but it wasn't particularly noteworthy, and he was very cordial on stage, which is not a bad thing necessarily. It just meant he got a little bit less debate time. That's just the reality of how these things go. It's a little bit of a reality TV show. One thing that was particularly difficult for Tim Scott to get around, and he didn't do great, is they asked him a question regarding federal spending, and it was very clear from his answer that Tim Scott is not committed to stopping spending. He basically talked about stopping spending, but then was pushed by Brett Baier, on Fox News on how he had passed huge spending with other Republicans in the past. And he didn't really have a legitimate rebuttal to that. He kind of just did this politician-y thing and slithered around it. So that was kind of his worst moment for the night. Other than that, he had no blunders. I wouldn't be surprised if we see his numbers go up a bit, especially as he takes from Mike Pence, who I predict will go down a bit, and then Asa Hutchinson and Doug Burgum, who are going to drop out of the race completely, along with the people who didn't even make the debate. So I expect his poll numbers will go up slightly, but it's hard to say for sure. Really quick, before we move on, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's video. That is Gulag America, and I'm wearing my shirt today. Really quick, a little bit. So I've partnered with Gulag America because they are a company that I believe in. They were so one of the founders of the company is actually a veteran. So if you love supporting veteran-owned companies, support Gulag America. It is an apparel company. As we approach sweater weather, they have excellent hoodies for both men and women. They have t-shirts such as this. They work as a great gift. Please consider using my link, JoshCarr10, for 10% off at gulagamerica.com. Again, that is JoshCarr10 for 10% off at gulagamerica.com. Now, moving on to Mike Pence. I want to talk. So the reason why I have to pair up Mike Pence and Vivek Ramaswamy together is because they were at each other's throats the whole time. And I will say at the end, I noticed Vivek Ramaswamy went up to Mike Pence and shook his hand. It seemed cordial. So it wasn't like, when I say they were at each other's throats, it wasn't crazy, but it was pretty bad. And they were fighting more than anyone else. So Mike Pence got kind of shut down by Fox a lot during this debate because Mike Pence was the big interrupter of the night. pretty much anything anyone said, he would kind of sound off on. And what was difficult for Mike Pence was oftentimes he was trying to defend his actions as a vice president. And what happened was he kind of was more defending Donald Trump because the reality is we have these administrations, right? Right now we have the the Biden Harris administration. Before we had the Trump Pence administration. But the reality is no one really thinks about it that way. We think about it as the Trump administration or the Biden administration. And so what happened was he was defending the things that him and Donald Trump had done together. But really, what it kind of sounded like was him just saying Donald Trump was an awesome president, except for that one time where he said that one thing I didn't like and I didn't listen to him. So it wasn't a really strong thing. Mike Pence basically ignored Brett Byers' questions a lot and told everyone he's basically just the most qualified. That was kind of his go-to. A lot of the times he was asked these questions, he kind of just ignored it and started spouting off his resume. Out of anyone, Mike Pence was definitely the most politician-y. He spoke a lot to like that small boy in Indiana vibe, which anecdotes can be powerful at times, but it just didn't come off that way. And so that's why I predict most of the bumps in the polling are going to come from Mike Pence's constituency. I would predict that he will drop out of the race before anyone else on that stage other than Asa Hutchinson and Doug Burgum, as I've discussed. Vivek Ramaswamy, this is where Vivek Ramaswamy comes into play. Vivek Ramaswamy basically went up there saying, I am the anti-establishment guy. I am not a career politician. And he was pretty intense about it. He literally said, I'm the only one on the stage that's not bought off, that I'm not paid for, which was a strong thing. And Mike Pence went at Vivek Ramaswamy for saying this. And he said, it's not the time for the new guy. And this was Mike Pence's worst moment of the day. What he said was, Vivek, it's not time for a new guy. Then he proceeded to talk about how great him and Trump did together. And the reason why that's so ironic is because Trump was the new guy, right? And what I'll talk about in a second is Vivek is kind of trying to be this Trump 2.0 figure, but just a little more eloquent, less indicty, if that makes sense. And so Pence sounded like a real hypocrite because he's saying basically, not time for a new guy. It was very clear that he was saying that we were great when we were the new guys, and it just didn't play really well. Vivek Ramaswamy had a lot of loud cheers for him at the beginning of the day. There was a moment where he was booed a lot. That was the moment where he just went at the other Republicans for being, he called them super PAC, paid off, and all those things were true. It was a little disappointing to see him at the beginning of the debate. I think he kind of lost himself in wanting to be that Trump 2.0. At least that's what I saw. And so he was going really hard. And I think it got to a level where it seemed like he was kind of mindlessly attacking the other candidates rather than giving real poignant criticisms of their campaigns or the way they had governed. Vivek Ramaswamy talked a lot about how corrupt they were, which, like, he used the word corrupt, I believe, or at least a word akin to that. And so it elicited a lot of politicians who were kind of pissed, especially Chris Christie and Mike Pence, and it did get some boos as well. So again, it seemed like Vivek Ramaswamy is kind of trying to be the new Trump. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm generally a big fan of Vivek. His strongest moment of the night was towards the end. This all happened in about the first 30 minutes of the debate. It seemed that there was a little bit of a turn after that 30 minutes, and he became much more likable and had a really strong finish. The best thing was at the very end, he said he was talking about education, and he was just very succinct about what he would do. He said he would abolish the Department of Education, and he would basically make nationwide school choice a thing and really attack local teachers unions, which most Republicans agree with that. And that's not something that was particularly revolutionary that he said, but the way he said it was very succinct, and it was better by far than the other candidates up there. And so I think he had a strong finish because of that. I think we might see a slight bump in Vivek Ramaswamy's polling as well, though I would not consider him the winner of the night.